Yes, sir. The dynamic duo is back for the latest episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. And our NHL-wide fantasy rundown continues with the offensive juggernaut, the Colorado Avalanche. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The intro music gets me fired up every time, but so does talking about fantasy hockey with my boy Steele Roden. It's the latest episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, and our NHL-wide rundown of fantasy beasts continues with the Colorado Avalanche. We'll be breaking it all down. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate for your company? Don't search, just match with Indeed. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. You need to hire, you need Indeed. Steele, what I need right now is a little jolt of fantasy hockey energy. Bit of a late night last night for your boy. So let's get at it, because you and I are literally looking at every single team across the NHL. And as I alluded to you off air, some of these teams aren't as pretty. But when it comes to fantasy gems, the Colorado Avalanche have three of the best. And I think our top five lists and our discussion about this team is going to be a fun one, because say what you will about the goaltending, and I want to talk about Alexander Georgiev, obviously a hot topic for this squad. When it comes to the offensive output of this team, not many better in the NHL. And when you're talking about Nathan MacKinnon, not many better players that I've ever seen. Lace him up, Steele. This guy is an absolute beast.
Maybe only one player better than him in fantasy hockey. I mean, you could maybe make the case for Nikita Kucherov after his season last year, but for me, it's only Connor McDavid above Nathan MacKinnon fantasy-wise right now. Nathan MacKinnon will be the second player off the board in fantasy leagues. If he falls past 3, again, there can be an argument for Nikita Kucherov, but if he falls past 3, I think that's an absolute miss in everybody that passes on Nathan MacKinnon. So he comes in at number 2 on the draft board. He comes in at number 1 for fantasy assets of the Colorado Avalanche. And I mean, when you look at the season that he had last year, it was absolutely incredible. 140 points in a full 82-game season. He hasn't played a full season since 2018. So he's had some injury concern throughout his career, but even with the injuries, he's still been above point per game player. Like I said, 51 points, first time he gets to 50-plus goals in his career, 89 assists for 140 points. The guy is an absolute savant on the power play, just like Nikita Kucherov as well. 48 power play points, with 38 of them being power play assists. 405 shots on net. We know that he loves to shoot the puck. He'll have consistent games of 7-8 shots on net in a row. And you got to love the peripherals as well. 69 blocks, 55 hits. I mean, from the guy who does everything offensively, still getting those blocks and hits in, that adds to his point total fantasy-wise. And I think there's no disagreement in the fantasy hockey community that Nathan MacKinnon is the top player, even above Cale Makar of the Colorado Avalanche, and he's going to be the second one off the board in fantasy drafts next season.
Sometimes you and I come on here and a really amazing game or play or something awesome happens in the NHL, and you look at it and go, if you're not a hockey fan and you saw that game or that play, you're a hockey fan now. Nathan MacKinnon, to me, when you watch him play and do some of the things that he does with absolute ease, he makes the game look so easy, Steele. And the way that he skates, it's just exciting. And if you're not a hockey fan, or maybe you're not into fantasy hockey, watch Nathan MacKinnon play a little bit closer and then come back to the table. And that's how you play hockey in today's NHL. 405 shots on net. I feel somehow that's kind of low for the ability that his shot has. It's definitely one of the best I've ever seen, Steele. And then you combine, you mentioned the injury side of things. And I think, unfortunately, when you play at the high octane pace and just like an absolute beast out there, as I alluded to off the top, Nathan MacKinnon style, sometimes you're going to get banged up. He's a good Nova Scotian boy. And just to go a little sidebar, because totally 100% slam dunk number 1. which is crazy when you think who's at number 2, in my opinion, in Cale Makar. And we'll get there in a second. Is this little line that they're formulating potentially, Steele, for the Four Nations Cup in Brad Marchand, Sidney Crosby, and Nathan MacKinnon, all Nova Scotian boys? That would be so, speaking of fun to watch, that will be must-see TV. So a little sidebar there, because lots of people are getting excited about that Four Nations Cup. You and I will talk about it when it gets much closer in the middle of the upcoming season. Let's talk about Cale Makar in a second if you're good, though, because let's also show the love to the Hart winner, Nathan MacKinnon, the Pearson. He is also a complete player. He plays two ways very, very well. Most definitely still. There were points during the year when the Edmonton Oilers were, a little up and down at times, obviously started slow. Nathan MacKinnon was the best fantasy piece in the NHL and the best player. And obviously McDavid went off and did McDavid things. Anyway, Cale Makar, what do you have to say about this? He's at number 2 for me. And also, this Colorado Avalanche team was a little quiet in the offseason. Not a whole lot of moves to be spoken of. We'll get to Georgiev, but Cale Makar, he loses Bowen Byram on that back end. And I know he's got Devin Taves, Josh Manson. There's still good players back there, Steele. Are you a little bit worried, perhaps, of how quiet this offseason was? Or is this team just so good offensively that it doesn't matter? By the way, led the league in the NHL last season in goals scored with 302, more than the Toronto Maple Leafs in second.
Look, they had a lot of restraints against the cap going into the offseason, so there wasn't a ton that they could do, especially with still Landeskog on the IR, and I definitely want to touch on Landeskog going into next season, and Nichushkin still being in the player assistance program as well, and he's suspended, I believe, for still another 6 months. For when the regular season starts. So there's lots to talk about with this Avalanche team. I also have Cale Makar at number 2. He will be, in my opinion, the second Colorado Avalanche player off the board. Again, there could be a case, and a legitimate one, for Mikko Rantanen being the second Colorado Avalanche off the board. Back-to-back 100-plus points for Mikko Rantanen. Back-to-back seasons of 40-plus goals. He had 55 the year prior. 40 points on the power play as well. Another power play savant, just like Nathan MacKinnon, just like the entire Avalanche first power play unit. But talking about Cale Makar, he's the best defenseman in the NHL. And I know I was talking about Evan Bouchard and fantasy-wise, Evan Bouchard being the second guy off the board, in my opinion. But Cale Makar is above him. Cale Makar, I did allude that Evan Bouchard could be number 1 off the board because of who he plays with and what he just did in the postseason. But Cale Makar is the best defenseman in the NHL. He does it both ways. He's great in his own zone. He knows how to get the puck off of the opponents in the offensive zone as well, and he knows how to carry the puck. He knows how to move the puck. He knows what to do on the power play to set up his teammates. He gets pucks through to the net with ease. And when you watch Cale Makar skate as well, when you have two of the best skaters on your team, one as a forward and one as a defenseman, it makes life easy. It makes the game easy. And I had a really good chance of watching the Colorado Avalanche play against the Toronto Maple Leafs last season, and watching both of them skate, specifically Nathan MacKinnon, but watching both of them play the game the way they do, the way they move the puck, the way they can turn on an absolute dime and get by defenders and move the puck at the pace they do. It's absolutely incredible to watch. So Cale Makar, again, is by far the best defenseman in the NHL. Fantasy-wise, I think it's getting close with what Evan Bouchard did this past season. I know that might be
Quinn Hughes is in that conversation too, points-wise.
Points-wise, for sure. I would love to see Quinn Hughes get his peripheral stats up. Me and the peripheral stats for sure. But Cale Makar right there with Evan Bouchard. Cale Makar is number 1 and second for the Colorado Avalanche off the board.
You mentioned the skating, the edge work. Cale Makar, it's like he's in turbo mode in NHL, on PS5. It's insane. And you're so right. It makes the game easy, and maybe that takes the pressure off a guy in Georgiev that saw a lot of rubber last year, Steele. So let's get to that. I'll finish my point on Makar right after the break. I knew this episode was going to be a fun one because of how good these players are. The first 4, in my opinion, on our list are going to be fairly evident. That number 5 spot will be intriguing to talk about. We'll get there after the break. Lots more to cover. We'll be breaking down more squads. Tomorrow's episode, all week, we're going NHL wide. We're going to be tapping into the New York Islanders on tomorrow's episode. So make sure you are here for all the latest. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Indeed. One of the things I love about Indeed, it makes all the hiring all in one place so easy. You never want to be stressing out when you're looking for that perfect candidate. Leverage over 140 million qualifications and preferences every single day. Indeed's matching engine constantly is learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Listeners of our show right now get a $75 sponsored job credit. Get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/locked-on. You heard it here on this podcast, Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Make sure you go check out Locked On Sports Today's YouTube channel, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day with the biggest and brightest stories without all the screaming from Fox Sports or ESPN. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, news, opinions, streaming 24/7 on YouTube, but you can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. The team that we're talking about on today's episode, one of the best fantasy-wise, especially in the offensive zone, and I'm including Cale Makar in there because he's a two-way defenseman.
Yes, sir.
Colorado Avalanche absolutely kill it. Another fantasy gold mine for your top 5 players off the board. Nathan MacKinnon comes in at number 1 for the Colorado Avalanche. Cale Makar comes in at number 2, even though there could be a conversation for Mikko Rantanen, but we can both agree Mikko Rantanen will be at least the third Colorado Avalanche off the board. And there's no questions about that whatsoever because of what he's been able to do. And like I said before, back-to-back seasons of 100-plus points. He puts the shots on net. Power play savant just alongside Cale Makar and Nathan MacKinnon. So how do you feel about Mikko Rantanen? And being honest, too, is like we could see potentially 3 Colorado Avalanche players taken in the first round.
100% Steele. And just to close my point on Makar, because I totally agree wholeheartedly, is when you look at the top power play teams in the NHL, it's just kind of, aside from obviously in a lot of fantasy formats, power play points are a key category. Just look at some of the top power plays in the NHL and go with those pieces. Lightning, Rangers, Oilers, Avs, Stars, Leafs, Panthers. If you're running out of options, go there and just thank us later. You know, I like to say that, Steele, but Cale Makar finally, at 25 years old, Steele, these numbers are actually a little bit insane. I think I had to clean my glasses. In 315 career regular season games, 336 points, and he plays on the blue line. His accolades, a Cup, a Calder, a Conn Smythe, a Norris, 4 All-Stars, and since he's entered the league, Steele, even as a rookie, he has been top 5 in Norris voting, and he entered the league as a 21-year-old. You know me and the ages, I got to throw out at least one this episode. But let's move on to Rantanen because you keep bringing up the power play. 40 power play points for Rantanen last year. That's 6th most in the NHL. This power play is scary good. And when you're talking about the power plays that we saw kind of go off last year, the Edmonton Oilers, even the Carolina Hurricanes were very good. These Colorado Avalanche, you do not want to be giving them any chances on the power play because when you also have guys like Mikko Rantanen, I don't know if you knew this because I know I did not. Mikko Rantanen is pushing 6'5". He is a big boy who does very well. Yeah, he does very well with his body protecting the puck. And then you see what he can also do. Steele, 50 penalty minutes as well. 53 hits. I don't hate it when you got triple-digit point value. And you're so right. 3 of these guys could, let's say you're in a 12 or 14-person league. I think it would be a slip if they don't go in the first round. That's just me. But the next couple of names on this list, a little bit more interesting. Mikko Rantanen, absolute stud, though.
More interesting for sure, especially the way that he played last year. And, again, there was a lot of down years for goaltenders this past season, Georgiev being one of them, Soaring being one of them. We saw Jake Ottinger struggle through the first half of the season.
Was a little up and down.
Vasilevsky, he has a little bit more of leeway with me because of the back surgery for sure. But that's still a valid point because of how he played. But Alexander Georgiev, he's going to come in at number 4 for me just because of, again, the team he plays on. He had 38 wins this last year. He had 40 wins the year prior after basically being a backup to Shesterkin for
that led the league, by the way, Steele, both years.
led the league with wins. He was 38, 18, and 5 last year, but he goes down. I mean, this is the part we really got to look into is in 2022-23 season, he had a 918 save percentage with a 2.53 goals against average. He went down big time to an 897 save percentage,
That's not good enough.
save percentage with a 3.02 goals against average.
Mhm.
It's not great. It's not great enough. It's not good enough for what you want to bring fantasy wise. Again, the wins are solid because you're getting, I mean, basically 50% wins in the season for what your starts are, more than 50%. But when you're playing in a categorical league and you have save percentages and goals against average adding up together with your other, goaltender or other two goaltenders in your fantasy league, it really starts to hurt those two categories and you start to lose them a lot more frequently. Alexander Georgiev, for me, is still going to be a top 10 fantasy goaltender off the board. We're going to have to do that episode soon and figure out
we
exactly
keep talking about it, but we need it even for our own sanity.
We do need it for our own sanity, but it's going to be interesting. He's most likely still a top 10 goaltender. Again, we're going to have to dive into that and into those episodes for the top 15 fantasy goaltenders going into next season. But he's going to be the fourth Colorado Avalanche off the board. And I think, again, the more we look into the 0G strategy for goaltenders and you look into some of the goaltenders that have been taken later in the drafts over the last couple of years, you start to think about maybe letting Georgiev slide a little bit. And I don't know exactly where he would fall and what his ADP was last year. I should probably bring that up, but we'll get there. But regardless of all of that, he's going to be the fourth Colorado Avalanche off the board.
100%. Rest of the episode, we're going to talk about potentially maybe a sleeper pick or two steal. The number 5 spot, we'll get there in a second. Georgiev also, though, steal that season 2 seasons ago. And I'm going to bring this up. I'm pretty sure he was top 10. He was 7th in Vezina voting. So those numbers, 918 save percentage, 2.53, and then you see this year's 897, the 302. I think he's somewhere in the middle in terms of what we can expect. I think that year or 2 years ago, as he played a little bit above what I think his full overall potential is, but I think he played below it this year. And that's just how good the
100%.
Colorado Avalanche are in front of him because of his wins, because of the team he is on. He is a valuable, very valuable fantasy goaltender. And that's where I think one of those things, and you know what I'm going to say, you got to separate what it means in the regular season and on the ice for what these teams do in terms of winning and losing from fantasy value. Because when you look at Georgiev in terms of where do you rank him in terms of the best goaltenders in the league, that's not going to match where you rank him for fantasy goaltending value. And when you also look into these numbers a little bit, Steele, he led the league last year in wins, 38 the year before and 40, like you said. But this year, he also led the league in goals against. 183 goals against is really not going to be good enough because also, and I'm going to leave it at this, we can go on to 5 and then wrap this bad boy up. Tomorrow's episode, Islanders, tap in. Look at what he was doing in the postseason, and I just had this up because against the Dallas Stars, first round, by the way, they dusted aside a pretty good Jets team. Maybe the Jets disappointed, but they were solid. Then they go up against the Dallas Stars. The Dallas Stars scored 22 goals between games 2 and 5, dusting aside the Colorado Avalanche. He wasn't good enough in the playoffs either, Steele. And I think this is one of those situations you're talking about him sliding after the iffy year in terms of the numbers, aside from the wins, and then the iffy playoff performance. You might be able to snag Georgiev at a really, really late round compared to where he was at last year and pounce on a good situation, at least in terms of wins. I don't know what he's going to do with the rest of those numbers and bouncing back, but I think he will be better because we know this offense is still going to get him at least 3 or 4 every single night.
A lot of mileage on his body, back-to-back seasons of 62 games in the regular season he started. So you got to love that for the game started. But again, when you get more and more, and especially playing in the playoffs as well, takes a lot on your body, especially for a goaltender. We've seen that with Andrei Vasilevsky, obviously having that back surgery. Lots more to talk about. We're going to get to our 5th best fantasy player of the Colorado Avalanche, maybe some sleeper picks as well, potential breakouts from players. Not a lot of moves from the Colorado Avalanche this offseason, but they are still a team to watch out for. We got to watch out for the news on Gabriel Landeskog as well, because that's going to be an interesting storyline going into next year. All of that and more coming up next. And once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us through the offseason, through the summertime. We love you guys so much for tuning in. It really does help us out. So thank you so much. We couldn't be more appreciative of all the support and all the kindness and all the comments we get. So thank you all out there that's tuning in. The everydayers, of course, and everybody that tunes into this podcast. So thank you so much for doing that for us. We really do appreciate it. Flip, though, number 5 on the list, the top 4 players on the Colorado Avalanche, easy. Clear cut, easy. Who was going where as well. But number 5, especially with the changes to this lineup, a few guys from injury, I think if we were going to be honest with ourselves, Valeri Nichushkin was probably going to be the 4th guy if he hasn't, kind of gone down the rabbit hole a little bit. And, he's in the player assistance program. We hope that he gets better. He's sort of done this to himself at this point in back-to-back playoffs. He's hurt his team. He's hurt his coaches. He's hurt the organization, and he's hurt the
fantasy value.
And he hurt his fantasy value as well. So Nichushkin's gone. Gabriel Landeskog has missed the last 2 seasons. He's had 2 different knee surgeries because of the injury that he had 2 seasons ago. So I think, maybe we have a conversation about Gabriel Landeskog. But as of now, as the team sits, who would you have off the board, number 5 from the Colorado Avalanche?
So you could look at a few names here, Steele, because we could probably have the conversation about Jonathan Drouin. You could maybe even throw in Arturi Lehkonen, who was also injured last year, missed a good chunk of the season. That might be one of those guys that you can get in a really late round because of the injury. There's obviously going to be concerns about what he does. Any of these pieces, though, and I'm going to go with my pick at 5 and Casey Mittelstadt. He got his 3-year contract. He's now settled. He's entrenched in Colorado. He's not going anywhere. He's also looking like the surefire number 2 center. He's going to get a ton of power play time, obviously likely power play 2 time because of all those studs in the first unit. However, he is still going to play with some good players in the likes of Jonathan Drouin and Lehkonen and others. So I think Drouin's a sneaky one that you've talked quite a bit about, and I wouldn't actually disagree with you if you put him there. 56 points last season. That's fantasy value. There's not a ton of peripheral value with Drouin. I don't know why I'm talking so much about Drouin when Mittelstadt is my selection, Steele. Obviously started a little bit slow, and considering he was an 8th overall draft pick, kind of a disappointing start to his career. But he's picked it up over the last couple, 59 points, then 57 last year. I think this is, if you're going to pick a breakout, I don't know if breakout is the right word, but I think sneaky, sleeper, under the radar, you want to throw those terms, Casey Mittelstadt is my guy. Not a ton of peripheral value, Steele, but given his playmaking ability and kind of his ability to really create for his teammates, if someone does go down and he actually slips up to that top unit somehow, his value goes up. I have him at number 5. I think he's a sneaky, good offensive piece. Not a ton of peripheral value, but I could see 65 points from him this year, no problem.
I think he will be on that top unit, especially with Nichushkin not being in the lineup, especially we don't know if Landeskog is going to be ready to start the year. He will be on the top power play unit because when you look at it right now, you've got Nathan MacKinnon, obviously, on the left side. You've got Mikko Rantanen over there on the right side. Cale Makar quarterbacking, Arturi Lehkonen, and then you've got Casey Mittelstadt in front of the net. So he's going to get first power play unit time. He's the clear-cut second-line centerman as well, and he's playing with a bunch of studs too. It's definitely a different-looking Colorado Avalanche team from the second line downwards. It's Arturi Lehkonen, Casey Mittelstadt, and Kovalenko, who I don't believe actually played a few games last year, but not that I can remember. It's going to be a different looking second line for this Colorado Avalanche team. So maybe it takes some time to get used to, the chemistry, get the flow going for them. But I also have Casey Mittelstadt as my 5th option from the Colorado Avalanche. Like you said, back-to-back 50 plus point seasons, 59 the year prior, 57 the year before. He had 10 points in 18 games for the Colorado Avalanche after he was traded from the Buffalo Sabres. You would, a lot more to be desired with the peripheral stats, of course, like you mentioned. Only 25 hits, 31 blocks, and 127 hits. I think you could easily go over to Arturi Lehkonen or Jonathan Drouin with MacKinnon. He has dealt with significant injuries the past few seasons as well. Jonathan Drouin playing on that top line with Nathan MacKinnon and Mikko Rantanen makes his fantasy value very intriguing. That's why I mentioned him as a late sleeper draft pick, from the 17th round downwards, 17 to 20. That's where you would be taking Jonathan Drouin. And he actually balled out last year, 50 plus points, like we mentioned, kind of the same peripherals alongside Casey Mittelstadt. The next guy in line for me would probably be Devin Taves. Devin Taves still brings a ton of fantasy value as that 5th or 6th defenseman off the board for your fantasy team. Those would be the options for me, but I agree with you. Casey Mittelstadt, I will use the word breakout. I think I'm going to say potential breakout because, again, there's still a lot to be desired with his peripheral stats. I would love to see him shoot the puck more. Definitely has a sneaky good shot that can fool and trick defenders and trick goaltenders when he decides to use it. But he is more of a playmaker and he passes the puck. So that's more of his style of play. That's his style of game. But again, if the peripherals start to creep up for Casey Mittelstadt, he's number 5 and he will be number 5 off the board for the Colorado Avalanche.
Mac Daddy, Cale Makar, Rantanen, Georgiev, Mittelstadt. Those are the 5 for the Colorado Avalanche. Honestly, still a quiet offseason. They bring in Eric Branstrom,
very quiet,
Calvin DeHaan, Parker Kelly, and someone named Jacob McDonald, who I've personally never heard of. Andrew Cogliano retires, not a big deal. They lose Trennan, Sean Walker, Zach Parise. None of these are earth-shattering changes that I really think make any impact on what this team is going to do.
Sean Walker was a little bit of a
That's true. That's true. I was going to round that point in terms of what they can do on the offensive end because they're still going to be so good. Not many teams can throw out the wrinkles that they do. New York Islanders on tomorrow's episode. Lots more breakdowns. We're literally going team by team, baby. And honestly, Steele, some of these squads that are coming up, cough, cough, Toronto Maple Leafs, we got a lot to talk about. You know what it is, though. 30 minutes, we get you guys in and out with everything that you need to know to dominate this upcoming fantasy draft season, Steele. And she's coming quick.
Maple Leafs might be a full day episode. There's going to be tons to talk about, but don't worry, we'll keep it to 30 minutes or less, just like this episode and the rest of the episodes through the offseason. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Once again, go check out Locked On Sports Days YouTube channel. They're absolutely killing it there with all the sports, biggest stories, top stories with opinions used from local experts. Make sure you go subscribe to the channel. You can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in to our team with Flip and I over here on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Have a great day. Good luck with your bets tonight throughout the summer, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.